Welcome to the IGEOS show, where we help grow the passion for an extraordinary workplace. If you're listening to or watching this, we hope to strengthen your passion for a workplace that has the potential not only to have an extraordinary impact on your life, but also on the world. My name is Amit Riker, and my co-hosts are Valerio Pascotto and Timothy Galway. Now to you, Valerio.
Thank you, Amit. What drives our efforts is really a vision and credo to enrich humaneness in the workplace. For that, we interview thought leaders who have been inspired by values of compassion, empathy, and modeling to share their discoveries, challenges, and successes. Really, there is no time like now to change the tide, from hateful divisiveness to seeking similarities, from the myth of the genius to the wisdom of humankind, and from the fears of the primitive brain to the wonder of generosity and warmth.
To support you in this work of creating extraordinary workplaces, we would like to offer you a free worksheet you can download on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. Just go to IGEOS.net to download the sheet and learn more about us. And now, on to our guest for today. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, conscious leaders and conscious teams. We have another wonderful special guest with us today, Jacqueline Carter. Had the good fortune to also meet her and Rasmus at the Global Force Work Human Conference. And so we're going to have a wonderful conversation with her today and the meaningful work that she's doing. So just to give a little introduction, Jacqueline Carter is an international partner and North American director for Potential Project, a global leadership training, organizational development, and research firm. The Potential Project helps leaders and organizations enhance performance, innovation, and resilience through mindfulness and practices grounded in neuroscience and research. With a Master's of Science in Organizational Behavior and over 20 years of experience supporting organizations through large-scale change, Jacqueline has held a wide variety of leadership and consulting roles across a range of industries, including transportation, oil and gas, insurance, and government. She has many years of personal experience with mind training, and over the past 10 years has focused on embedding mindfulness practices into daily corporate life. Along with Rasmus Hugard, they are the authors of the books 1 Second Ahead, Enhance Your Performance at Work with Mindfulness, and their most recent book, The Mind of the Leader, How to Lead Yourself, Your People, and Your Organization for Extraordinary Results. Jacqueline, such a pleasure to have you. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much. And oh my goodness, that was such a big introduction. I feel like I'm on a pedestal and now you got to put me down and you, yeah. So thank you for that. That was very sweet and very kind.
Well, it's my honor. It's our pleasure to have you. So while we dive in, I know just having seen some of your other recordings, you have your own practice. And then before we sort of get into the books and your work, like, why mindfulness? Why has that been important for you?
Well, it's a great question. And it's so nice to be able to share this publicly now because, and you'll find that as I tell my stories. So I tripped into mindfulness in actually my late teens. And it was really around a lot of curiosity. I was so I also actually started my undergrad degree in math and physics. So I've always been interested in science. And starting to really, as many of us do, starting to turn my own scientific curiosity to my own crazy mind. Like, why do I think the things I do? Why am I, I should be happy with this and I'm not. And so just really starting to ask these questions. And with that comes, when you start to look into it, naturally, mindfulness is one of the paths to be able to start exploring the nature of your own thoughts. And with that, I started to really get into meditation, went on long-term retreats, and just absolutely loved it and found that for me, it was just a way to be able to help me be more focused, more calm, more clear-minded. And as I started to get into my professional life, so I was with Deloitte Consulting for many years, I found that it was my mindfulness practice when I didn't practice in the morning. I noticed a difference between when I did practice, and it was really simple. I was able to watch thoughts as they arise and say, okay, well, I don't need to pay attention to that right now. I can be here and I can be present. And I found it was almost like a superpower for me in terms of being able, and I'm not saying that I was perfect for sure, because I do believe mindfulness is a practice. It's not mindfulness perfect, but I just found it really helped me show up more often in the way that I wanted to show up at work. But, and this gets back to why I'm so happy you asked the question and I'm happy that I can share it, is when I was with Deloitte Consulting, I worked with them in the US and Canada and Australia. And just to give you a scenario of my life, at that time, one of my clients was the Australian Department of Defense. The last thing that I was going to tell a bunch of Aussie blokes with guns was that in my spare time, I like to sit on an uncomfortable cushion and count my breaths. Like, that was never going to happen. So I was really very much, I would say, a closet practitioner of mindfulness, because I just thought that the corporate world that I saw and that I experienced every day was the exact opposite of everything that I was doing in my mindfulness practice. So I never shared it with anybody. And it was really just 8 years ago that I was I was project manager for a multi-million-dollar, very complicated project, system change, process change, people change, everything. And the client, the CFO, that was also a good friend of mine and my client, he stood up on stage and he passed out. And he was delivering a presentation that I had prepared for him. And I was like, you're good, you're great. And when the ambulances came and they checked him out and they couldn't find anything wrong. And I knew what was wrong. I knew he was not taking care of himself. He was not taking care of his mind. He was overwhelmed. He was overworked. And at that moment, I felt so ashamed that I had these tools that were really, honestly, so simple, not easy, but simple. And I had been too ashamed to share them with anybody. And so it was kind of my crucible moment. I said, if anybody's going to listen, I'm going to do my best to try to share these practices in a corporate setting to be able to make sure nobody else passes out on stage delivering a presentation, at least that I created. And at that point, I was able to meet Rasmus, as you mentioned. He's actually the founder of Potential Project, and started up our operations in Asia and helped start up our operations in Australia. And of course, now my role is Potential Project in North America. So that's my story.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. So how was that experience when you first realized, okay, I have to share this? What was the experience from that person or the company? And I'm sure this is a theme that you talk about, the resistance, but what was that experience?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, it was fear. I remember the first client that I went into, and I won't mention the name because they're not a client of Potential Projects, because I didn't do a very good job. But I remember trying to explain to them why mindfulness would be beneficial to their organization. And I choked on my words. They asked me good questions. I couldn't answer, because even though I was so passionate about bringing these two things together, I still couldn't connect the dots in terms of helping an organization to understand why slowing down and stopping and pausing and all of the things that are really critical to what we do in our mindfulness practice, how I could specifically tie those to business outcomes. And so that was, as I said, about 8 years ago. And that's really been the work of Potential Project, is we have really worked hard to really be able to look at things from a business perspective, looking at performance objectives, looking at outcomes, and really making mindfulness tools and techniques so practical. So what does being mindful look like in a meeting? What does it look like when we want to be creative? What can we do to help us manage our overwhelming inbox? And really make it really practical and put it in business terms. The other thing that for us is, if people, find the word mindfulness weird, well, we don't care. We don't have to use mindfulness. We can, train the mind to enhance performance. But I think the other thing that's really helped is, as of course mindfulness now has exploded, it's become so much more popular. And a lot of that is because there's tons of science. So, for many people, when you flash up, I can flash up an fMRI scan and show, when you train your brain, this is actually the part of the brain that grows, the one that's responsible for managing your attention. So I think that things have just changed a lot since Potential Project first started, and I think for a lot of people, the science really helps, because honestly, you know, it's difficult. You sit for maybe 5-10 minutes doing mindfulness training, and you think, does this actually work? And for a lot of people, the science really helps to say, yeah, the research actually says this is actually helpful, and then maybe that'll help you stick with it and see for yourself.
Wonderful. One of the things, as I was going through your book, I noticed you talked about how you had, did I capture it right? Your research included over 30,000 leaders, and then diving into sort of leading to the book. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, just a huge gratitude to all of the leaders that we interviewed and that completed our assessments. Just really grateful to be able to share so many of those perspectives. So what we did is we partnered with Harvard Business Review Press, which is just an amazing partner. They are incredible. And through them, we were able to tap into a very large network of leaders through their HBR assessments and tools. And we started out with, we were able to assess, it was actually 35 leaders that we were able to assess. We did more in-depth interviews with 250 C-suite executives. And then we also had a survey, a longer survey that over 1,000 leaders from 72 different countries responded to, which was, again, great. And in addition to that, we also, of course, did our own field research. We engaged researchers, so scientists specifically in the field of neuroscience, and also engaged a number of our many clients. So we have over 450 clients around the world. We didn't want to just interview our clients, because then it would definitely be a very biased book. So that was our process.
Wonderful. What I really appreciated in the book is the way you have the format or the structure of the book. Very systematic. I love you talk about this MSc leader, and I'd love for you to get into that in just a moment. But then you take sort of each step of looking at it at the self level, at your team and people level, and organizational, and each one there's the components of sort of your own awareness and then the MSc. So maybe starting with the MSc, what is the MSc leader, and how did you come to these three qualities being sort of the most pivotal or important based out of the research and the work that you were doing for this?
Yeah, well, thanks. So M is for mindfulness, S is for selflessness, and the C is for compassion. And those were really the core qualities through our research that we identified as being absolutely fundamental, critical for leaders today. And what was interesting actually is, I mean, as I said, we've been doing mindfulness training for well over a decade with Potential Project. So the mindfulness, you could say we were looking for, and yeah, probably, you know, that one it wasn't surprising that it came out. But it was really amazing. It was actually, what surprised us is how strong people supported the mindfulness. And I'll get to the definition of that in a moment for those of you who aren't familiar with it. But the cool thing was actually how it was really through our research that in addition to mindfulness, how selflessness and compassion really came to the forefront. And just again, to be really simple in terms of definitions, mindfulness, there's many different ways you can look, but we try to keep things simple. So it's basically being able to be here now, to be able to be focused and aware of what's going on inside your own mind and as well and the world around you. But then also to be able to use that ability to be effective in how you use your mind, how you use your precious, precious, precious attention moment to moment. Selflessness is the way that we defined it anyway, is basically the wisdom of getting out of your own way. We know from a brain science perspective that we have a natural tendency, and very normal, to see the world from our own point of view, a very I-centric focus of the world. And that as a leader can get us into a lot of trouble. If it's all about me, my, and mine, then how am I really making sure that I'm doing things that are in the best interest of us, of the team, of the organization? And so selflessness is really about not letting our ego drive the day, but helping us to be able to have a more other focus, which is hard from a brain perspective. So that's what we get into in the book. And then compassion is really the ability to be able to bring benefit to others. So it's a mantra of how can I be of service, and really looking to bring more caring and kindness and compassion into our teams, into ourselves, first of all, as you said, that's the structure, ourselves, starting with that. But then to our teams and our organization, and not in a fluffy, flaky way, What we've seen in the research really backs this up, that when we, and it makes sense, but it's actually backed up by research, is that when we bring more caring and compassion into our everyday work, it enables us to have tough conversations, but in a really caring way. It enables us to really work better together, to collaborate, to be able to overcome address diversity and inclusion opportunities, because we know that when we have diverse workplaces, it's more beneficial for us in terms of creativity. And so bringing that caring and compassion to enhance social cohesion is really strategic. And that was really what we found in our research. So that's the MSC model.
Wonderful. I love, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, because just even in some of the work that I do with my clients, that very notion similarly of compassion or kindness meaning that you're a pushover.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. And to have that compassion, there's an underlying courage with it to be able to still be a human and say, hey, this fell through the cracks. What happened? And then still care about, the working relationship. And that was really wonderful to see. So speaking of pushover, I remember seeing in there you have a number of matrices that you talk about, sort of different dynamics for each of the elements. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how that played into development of the book or your research?
Yeah, so we were really we try to be very practical. That's our nature, and we try to keep things as simple as we can. And so for those people that are very visual oriented, what we wanted to do for each of the M, S, and C, we wanted to try to see if we could put it in a matrix to help frame it for people so that they understand what does it actually mean to be mindful, to be selfless, to be compassionate. And for mindfulness, we looked at the difference on the vertical axis. It's the difference between being focused versus being distracted. And on the horizontal axis, it's the difference between being openly aware versus just being on autopilot. And the sweet spot, and this will be for each matrix, will be in the top right-hand corner. So that's another way you can think about it. Am I distracted, or am I focused, and am I aware, or am I on autopilot? And if I'm focused and aware of what I'm focused on, because you really need both of those qualities, because you can be 100% focused on the wrong things. So you want to be able to be focused and aware, and that's another way of defining mindfulness. For selflessness, what was really interesting is we got into a lot of conversations with a lot of the leaders. And it was exactly that question that you had about being a doormat. Like if I make it all about others, then, people are going to think that I'm a pushover and they're just going to walk all over me. And so what we really wanted to combine it with, and this was what we heard again and again, was the idea of combining selflessness. So not making it being about me, not being egocentric, but with very strong self-confidence. Because it's actually really important for me to be able to say, hey, like, I respect myself. I'm going to take care of myself. And hey, if I feel like you're not treating me with respect, I'm going to stand up for that. But doing it because it's not out of fear. It's not because I'm worried that, I'm going to look bad or I'm trying to make myself look good. It's because it's in the best interest of the team and of the organization. And so the sweet spot, again, so it's the difference between being selfless, but as opposed to being totally self-interested, so selfish, and being confident as opposed to being diffident. And again, the sweet spot is that combination of what we call selfless self-confidence. On the compassion side, we really wanted to explore this idea of not just making it fluffy and flaky, because we've seen lots of people, and we heard this from leaders, and they actually would say to us, I'm worried that if I'm too compassionate, then I won't, give people the feedback that they need, or I'll just be seen as being really nice, but not being seen as being strategic. And so what we wanted to do there is we wanted to juxtapose the idea of being compassionate versus not caring about people at all, which we didn't think was very good. But adding that on the horizontal, this idea of bringing wisdom into your compassion as opposed to being ignorant. Because if you're really compassionate, but you do it in stupid ways, that's really not helpful to anybody, including yourself. And that would be an example. If I don't take care of myself, that's not bringing wisdom into my own self-care. So that's, a way to be able to look at it. So the sweet spot that we looked at there was wise compassion. And wise compassion means, if you need to give me feedback, I want that feedback because that's going to help me grow and develop. but I want you to do it in a caring and kind way because you care about me, not just because you want to cut me down, but to be able to stand up to that. And I loved the word that you used, which was courage, because I think a lot of, tough conversations in organizations, especially when there's caring underlying it, need courage to be able to stand up and stand into those opportunities. So those are our matrices.
Wonderful. I'm a sucker for models and matrices, so I wanted to make sure it took some time to have you explain that. So what I really appreciated, especially with the selflessness, this is very similar with a lot of the work that IGEOS and Tim and Valerio do with the team training workshop, and really getting into the mindset of like, how are you really holding a team mindset versus a self mindset? And it becomes very quick. You can see where those can break down, particularly when you're not being aware of your own interferences in the way. So I love it. Could you tell us a little bit? So one of the things you talk about in the book, and I think also in your 1 Second Ahead, some of the 2 key qualities of mindfulness: focus and awareness. So could you tell us a little bit more about that? Why those 2?
Yeah, well, it's actually, it's a lot of what we actually train in mindfulness training to be able to enhance our mental effectiveness. So it's really focus, being able to be here now. So I can be focused on you, this interview. We know that our mind wanders. The research actually suggests that our mind wanders almost half of our waking hours. And it wanders because we're distracted by external things. So there might be, dog barking outside or lights or something that's stimulating me. But mostly we're distracted by our own thoughts. So thoughts of what am I going to say next, or thoughts about, am I saying something that's smart? All these kinds, or random thoughts like, what am I going to have for lunch tomorrow? Like crazy random thoughts. So the focus is really to tame the wandering mind. And one of the things I think that's really important is we shouldn't beat ourselves up for having a wandering mind. A wandering mind is actually beautiful, because when our mind wanders, that can be the seed of creativity. It can be insight, or it's when we realize something we need to attend to that's important to us. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up for having a wandering mind. It actually can be very beneficial. But the focus training, which is really the first aspect that we get into with the mindfulness, helps us to be able to say, I'm not going to pay attention to that right now. I'm going to be here now. So that's focus. But like I said, when I was describing the matrix of mental effectiveness, which is the mindfulness matrix, we can be 100% focused on the wrong things. So the awareness is really about making sure that we're choosing what we focus on, and we choose that well, and we choose that mindfully. So for example, we could, and maybe listeners can relate to this, have you ever had the experience where you were in a meeting, you said something wrong, or maybe you didn't say something that you wanted to say, and after the meeting, like hours after the meeting, you're still in the meeting in your head, right? Like you're still beating yourself up. Why didn't I say that? Or why did I say that? And it's just wasting your time and everybody else's. And it's like something that's just in your head that you can't get rid of. And to be aware of that, and to say, and it's hard, it's not easy, and that's why these tools, but the awareness of, do I really want to, how long do I want to carry that for? How long do I want to be in that meeting? It's done. I've apologized, or I've made amends. Do I really still want to be clouded by that? And that's really what the awareness training does. It gives us this, and that's why I think it's such an amazing power. It gives us the ability to recognize we are not our thoughts. We have thoughts, but we don't need to be consumed by them. I can have a thought that's frustration. It doesn't mean I need to be frustrated. And again, not easy. But that's what the awareness training does. It lets us it changes the nature of our relationship with our mind, to be able to be more an observer, and then to be able to make choices when we can, and not always, when we can, on what we choose to focus on. So that's really the combination of those 2.
What I appreciate, and it's a little mix between you go in and you spend time on here's some training, here's some exercises on how to actually do some of these, and I was curious for you to share. So I imagine a number of folks from who may be watching this may already be familiar, but for those who aren't, what's the subtle difference between doing the training for awareness versus this training for focus? And how can we know that we're developing those two muscles, so to speak? Because for a beginner, they may both look very similar. Like, how is this any different?
It's a great question. And what we strongly, strongly, strongly recommend is to start with focus training. So focus training is the basic. It is, and it's so, and again, simple. The way we introduced it is ABCD to keep it even easier. But it's basically, and it's really, it's like going to the mental gym. So in what we recommend, the weight that we recommend lifting in the gym is focusing on your breath, not trying to control it in any way, but can you stay with your breath? And when you get distracted, can you come back to your breath? And that's basic focus training. And the focus training is really the foundation to be able to then move into the awareness training. Because as I said, with the awareness training, what we're enabling ourselves to do in the awareness training is to be able to focus on moving things. So focus on our thoughts. That's actually, if we don't have a good stability of mind, when we start to do the awareness training, we need to be able to have some ability. Otherwise, it's just overwhelming and we start to, get daydream, and it's not really the training at all. So what we recommend to people is to start with a good 5 weeks of basic, ABCD mindfulness training, and we have free apps available on our website that people can download if they want to, or a free app on your Android or your iPhone. And start with that for 5 weeks to really develop the mental muscle of focus and stability of mind. And then when you're ready, moving on to the awareness training. The one thing that I should just say is, even though you start with focus training, they're both really incredibly important. So it's not that one is better than the other. So even after you start to get into the awareness training, you still need to come back to focus training, because they're like muscles that continue to need to be developed as you go forward.
Could you tell us what the ABCD stands for with the model that you've developed or
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, this is kind of what we shaped, but it's been time tested for thousands of years, well beyond us in terms of, and we have great respect for our teachers who have introduced these methods to us, and we've just put it into what we think is easy, simple language. So the A is for anatomy, and it's basically about checking in with your body and making sure that you're relaxed. You don't want to be too relaxed so that you fall asleep, but that you're relaxed and that you're grounded and you're balanced. And it's really interesting to start with that, because we know the research tells us, and most of our own experience tells us, most of us are carrying too much unnecessary tension in our bodies. And we don't want that to get in the way of the mind training. So the first step is relaxation. The B is for the breath. As I said, it's focus training. So we could use a spot on the wall, we could use a pen, we could use anything. But the breath is a great object to use for lifting the weight, for going to the gym, because ideally we're always breathing until our last breath. So it's always there with us. So by using it as a training tool, we can do it in the mental gym, but then also in the meeting when we really need to be able to be a little bit more focused and calm. The breath is with us as our tool. So we focus on the breath, as I said, without trying to control it, just observing the natural inflow and outflow of the breath. And then the C is for counting. What we do is we find that most people, even beginners for sure, but even as we become more experienced practitioners, the counting is a great way to make sure that you're actually doing the practice and not just sitting there and having a nice mind-wandering exercise. So what we recommend with the counting is we breathe in, we breathe out, we count 1 silently to ourselves, breathe in, breathe out 2, all the way up to 10. And just again, to make sure that we're not going on autopilot, at 10, we start counting backwards, 10, 9, 8, all the way back down to 1, and just continuing in cycles. And the D is for distractions. And what we really emphasize is that the distractions are actually our friends in mindfulness. Many of us, type A, I want to be really good at mindfulness training. And this was actually one of the things I had to work through for long years. I was like, yes, every time I got a distraction, I would get so upset, beat myself up, which is completely the opposite of what we want to do in mindfulness. So the D is actually when you're aware that you're distracted. That's a moment to celebrate, because it's like, wow, I'm now developing actually an awareness that I'm distracted. I can make a choice, and I can gently release the distraction. I can relax, because making sure I haven't got any tension from having that moment of distraction, and simply return my full attention by choice back to my breath. And that's the whole practice. It's, again, it's simple to describe, and it's simple in theory, but it's really in the practice, and it's really doing that over and over again. And what we find is that starting out, the science and the research, and we've had our programs have been researched by third-party researchers from Cambridge University and other places, but 10 minutes of ABCD for 2 weeks. And so that's my invitation to anybody who hasn't tried a mindfulness practice. But 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks has been actually shown for many people to have actually a significant benefit of helping to be more focused, more calm, and more clear-minded.
What I appreciate with that model ABCD is that distraction is part of the process.
Exactly.
That one of the things I've often heard for folks who've never tried any meditation or mindfulness practice, I've heard many times where it's like, oh, I'm not focused enough to do meditation or mindfulness. And it's like, no, you practice that so you can help get more focus. And so it's very much the flip.
Well, exactly. I have had people say, oh, Jacqueline, I suck at mindfulness because my mind is so distracted. And I said, but are you aware that it's distracted? I'm like, yes, then you're practicing. That is actually good. And I should really say that, people automatically assume that the objective of the exercise is to get to 1 to 10 and, 10 to 1 as many times. That's not the objective at all. The objective is to notice that you're distracted and keep coming back. And if you do that even once or twice, even if you only got to 2 or to 3, even if you only got to 1 and got distracted, but it's really that every time you get distracted, you bring your attention back. That's when you're actually building the attentional muscle. And so it really is, all part of the exercise is the distractions are our friends because they're what help us build the muscle.
Wonderful, wonderful. What I'd love to get into now, we've been talking a lot on the mindfulness side of things. Maybe 2 pieces, maybe we'll sort of trajectory over. So what I really appreciated you talking about in your book is that part of developing as a leader, developing for a high performing company is really to start with ourselves first. And you talk about a lot of leadership training is strategic thinking, very external base. So why does starting with yourself help shift into producing meaningful results, high performing results externally?
Yeah, and again, don't want to say that we were the first ones to figure this out. I think most people, it kind of makes logical sense. And actually, we had a quote from Peter Drucker, a management guru, who says, if you can't lead yourself, then you can't lead others, basically. Right. But I think what's really interesting is that even and this was really what we found when we talked to, so many leaders that we interviewed, what they would say is, they would say that even management development programs that would have 360 reviews, which would give them insights from, people find you to be very abrupt, or people find you to be, an inspirational leader, but not very easy to connect with. And that you could say is some form of self-awareness. But if you don't know, what do you do with that? Okay, so people find me to be, impatient sometimes. Well, okay, I'll try to be more patient. And what we know, and this is really why we don't just, in our book and in our experience, it's not just knowing that there are things, behaviors that you have, habits that you have that may or may not be very helpful or conducive to the leader that you want to be. How can you actually get into the workings of your own mind to be able to change those habits? Because it's hard. And that's really what we say. It's not just about understanding yourself. It's actually about starting with your mind and really understanding how your mind works. And that's really, it has to be through practice. It has to be through reflective practices that help you be able to say, this is actually a moment where I usually get impatient. And maybe, not always, maybe today I'll choose a different path. Maybe I won't, but maybe I will, because I have that more stronger mental, basically, mental control, mental discipline to be able to watch the impulses as they arise and in the moment make different choices.
How could you say that now, taking that and extending it to, say, we have our own practice, we're developing, we're noticing shifts. How is that now extending out to, as you present in the book, from yourself to your team and people to the organization?
Well, I think that when we start to really start to understand the workings of our own mind, it does two things for us. One, it helps us to be able to be more effective, to be able to make different choices. And as I just said, like, it's really the foundation for what we see. Any leadership journey should start with a foundational understanding of your own mind, because that's where your behavior and your actions all start from. That's where, you can tap into your values and make sure that you're aligned with what you want to be. It all starts with the mind. So that's why we believe it's so important to start with your mind. But I think, as you said, like, so what's the connection? I think that once we start to tap into our own mind, it also gives us greater appreciation for others. It's like, wow, you get emotional just like I do, like we're emotional beings. We're not rational. I've seen my own emotional, ridiculous craziness. Now I can appreciate yours more. And we also can tap into, what actually really makes us happy, what's important to us. And what we realize is, it's not like the status and the symbols and the material wealth. What really actually makes us happy is when we feel like we're adding value, when we feel purposeful, when we feel like we're doing something that is meaningful, when we make connections with other people. And it's really through understanding ourselves and seeing what really drives us, what motivates us, what's important to us, that we can then start to, as a leader, look for those in others and say, how can I actually help you, not be so distracted, be more focused, and also feel like you're achieving things that are important to you. How can I help you realize more of your potential? And I think that it's really through that understanding of ourselves that then we're able to better understand our teams and be able to help to guide them through our own experience and wisdom. And then, of course, be able to extend that larger out to our organizations.
What were some of either the results that you saw more on the results side or the organizational side? What were some of the things that you saw during your research or your work with Potential Project in general?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is that we looked, is there an organization that is a mindful, selfless, and compassionate organization? We couldn't find one that we would say, yeah, they check all of the boxes, they do everything right. Organizations are messy, human beings are messy. So we couldn't find one that we would just say, and even organizations that aspire to be extremely mindful. Of course, no one's perfect. So it's always hard to be able to, as researchers, to say, yes, let's put this organization on a pedestal. But what we did find, and this is certainly in our work with Potential Project and bringing mindfulness into organizations over the last decade, is that real results, like things like, we worked with Carlsberg for a number of years, and they were able to measure that because they were more present with each other in meetings, their meeting time reduced by 20%. So tangible outcome, like, okay, that works. We were able to, we've worked with creative agencies, with ad agencies. They were able to see that with the mindfulness practice, when they got out of the busyness and the always on, that they were able to take more space, and they found that they were able to come up with more creative solutions for their clients. We also, Accenture is a big client of ours. We've been working with them for a number of years. And what they are really looking for is, all they have is their smart brains, because they're consultants. And, what they've been able to measure is, the ability for their consultants to be able to be more focused when they're with clients, when they're with colleagues, increased by significant numbers across a wide range. So our programs have been evaluated. We've been working with them for over 3 years, and they've been evaluated and researched. So significant increases in focus, from like 20 to 30% increase in focus, ability to get better sleep, which was a real priority for them. So improvement in sleep quality, reduction in stress, and improvement in work-life balance. And so these are all the things we're very focused on measurement. Every program that we have, we do pre-post and surveys, and oftentimes post surveys, as well as post to see whether there's sustainable change. But those are some of the things that we've seen. And also, just increase in performance, just in terms of, I feel like I'm getting more done. You can't have more time in the day, but if you're more focused, you can use it more effectively. It actually feels like, wow, I can actually get more of my work done in the time that I have.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Jacqueline, we're coming near to the end of our time, and I wish we could keep going on for many more hours. But maybe as we're wrapping up here, a lot of our audience were really looking to how, as conscious leaders, conscious teams, organizations really looking to do meaningful, purposeful work. What words of wisdom would you part us with to help us really bring the work that you've been doing and cultivate into the meaningful work that they are looking to do?
Well, again, you're putting me under a lot of pressure, words of wisdom. I'll do my best. I think what I would say, what inspires us the most, and what we really want to be part of is as a movement, which we're really seeing, is to bring more people-centric leadership and more people-centric organizations. I think that we really need, what we saw is that over the past couple of decades, there's been such a shift in focus to shareholder wealth as opposed to employee health. Mm-hmm. And it's just so detrimental. It's so wrong, because at the end of the day, whether you're whatever you're the C-suite executive, who's the one who's serving your customers? Who's the one who's actually going to make sure that you get that bonus at the end of the year? And if you're not focused on those frontline workers, those people that are actually caring for your customers, and if they're not happy, and if they don't feel that they're part of creating this organization and part of serving a greater mission and cause, you're just going to be in trouble. And I think that what we're really inspired by, a lot of people are maybe critical of the next generation of millennials. And we are actually inspired by them, because they're standing up and they're saying, I'm not going to work for 80 hours a week and not be treated well. I want to have purpose and meaning in my work. And I think that they're actually standing up for things that we all want and that are important to all of us. And I think that organizations, thought leadership, I think we are seeing it. So many organizations are starting to get that and putting people at the center of their strategy. And if there's any wisdom, maybe it's not wisdom, but maybe an appeal is just for any of you who are interested in being a part of a movement to be able to bring more people-centric and human-centric organizations and leadership. That's something that we're passionate about, and we'd love to engage you in conversation to do that together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Everybody, The Mind of the Leader, and please check out Jacqueline and Rasmus's work. Where can people find out more about you and your work, Jacqueline?
So they can check out our website, www.potentialproject.com. And as I said, there's actually a dedicated area for The Mind of the Leader, including some resources that people can download to be able to get more information. And you can also find my contact information through our website. I'm very happy, again, to connect with anybody who's interested in this space. We're stronger when we're all working on it together.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Thank you, everyone. Conscious leaders, conscious teams. Pleasure to have you with us today. And Jacqueline, thanks so much for your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be talking again soon. Cheers. Thank you for joining us today. We have many more exciting thought leaders to come on this show. If you enjoyed this interview, please click the like button and also subscribe so that you can stay tuned to learn from other powerful thought leaders in future shows. We would also appreciate your comments and feedback on the show, as well as who else you would like to hear from. And don't forget to visit our site, IGEOS.net, to download the free worksheet on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. See you next time.